All right, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we are live. I hope everybody can see and hear us well. My name is Desmond Cole, and it is my absolute pleasure and honor to be moderating this final panel for Scholars Strike Canada this fall, entitled The Repression of Academic Freedom and the Criminalization of Dissent and Free Expression in Support of Palestine on University Campuses. We have a wonderful assemblage of speakers, thinkers, students, scholars, activists, all contributing to the struggle in their own ways, who are going to speak with us. We've been a little behind schedule right now, and I know some of our guests have a hard out in exactly an hour from now. We had promised this panel was an hour 15, and we'll see what happens with it. We're just so happy that everybody could join us and could be part of Scholars Strike this semester. And I've got a lot of thank yous to make at the end of this. So to our incredible team who are working behind the scenes, please don't forget me to send me that list so that I can make sure after we're finished here that I can thank absolutely everyone who has made this event possible. I'm going to introduce everybody and get right into this discussion. And so we're going to have introductions and opening statements from everybody, and then we'll get right into a much broader discussion. So first, I'd like to welcome Nala Abdo, who is an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, feminist activist, and Chancellor's Professor of Sociology at Carleton University. Nala has extensive publications on racialized capitalism, settler colonialism, and genocide, focusing on Palestine and Turtle Island. Among her recent publications, Israel's Settler Colonialism and the Genocide in Gaza, Studies in Political Economy from this year, as well as The Palestine Exception, Racialization, and Invisibilization from Palestine to Turtle Island, Critical Sociology from 2023. Along with her multiple articles, Professor Abdo published several books, including An Oral History of the Palestinian Nakba, co-edited in 2018, Captive Revolution, Palestinian Women's Anti-Colonial Struggle, 2014, and Women in Israel, Race, Gender, and Citizenship from 2011. Thank you so much, Nala, for being here.
Very welcome. I'm glad to be among all of these great guys here.
Me too. Next, Momadou Tal. Momadou is a UK law graduate from the University of East Anglia. And after obtaining his LLB, Momadou traveled to Cairo to study at Al Azhar Mosque, where he received an Islamic license in Islamic law and Arabic. Momadou is currently in his third year of his PhD at Cornell University in the Africana department. His research focuses on conceptualizations of sovereignty with a particular focus on West Africa. Momadou is the host of a popular podcast, The Malcolm Effect, dedicated to political education. Momadou, so nice to have you here. Next, we welcome Sarah Rosick, a community organizer and a graduate student based in Toronto with over 7 years of experience in gender justice and Palestine solidarity organizing. Sarah examines anti-colonial social justice movements and transnational feminist theories in her research at the University of Toronto. Her work combines practical and theoretical insights, focusing on emerging theories of solidarity. Sarah, it's so nice to see you. I'm going to add too that Sarah was main spokesperson for the People Circle for Palestine, a 2-month encampment at the University of Toronto. And it's nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Next, Dr. Muhannad Ayash, who was born and raised in Silwan Al-Quds before immigrating to Canada, where he is professor of sociology at Mount Royal University. He is also a policy analyst at Al-Shabaka, the Palestinian Policy Network. Muhannad is the author of A Hermeneutics of Violence, published in 2019. He has published in several academic articles on topics such as political violence, Zionism and colonial modernity, vaccine apartheid and anti-Palestinian racism, and Palestinian decolonial movements in numerous academic journals. He has also co-edited two books, most recent with Jeremy Wildman, titled Canada as a Settler Colony on the Question of Palestine. Mohammed is also the author of multiple book chapters and has written opinion pieces for Al Jazeera, The Buffer, Al Jazeera, The Baffler, Middle East Eye, Mondevice, and The Breach, among others. Mohammed, it's so nice to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And finally, Sunera Tabani, a distinguished professor in the Department of Asian Studies at the University of British Columbia and fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. Sunera is the author of Contesting Islam, Constructing Race and Sexuality, published in 2020, Exalted Subjects, Studies in the Making of Race and Nation in Canada, published in 2007, and co-editor of Coloniality and Racial Injustice in the University, published in 2022, Asian Women Interconnections from 2005, and States of Race, Critical Race Feminist Theory for the 21st Century, published in 2010. Sunera's research is also published in numerous edited volumes and peer-reviewed journals, including Borderlands, Atlantis Feminist Theory, the Supreme Court Review, International Journal of Communication, Hypatia, and Race and Class. And Sunera, it is a pleasure to have you here also.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go. In the order that I just introduced you then, starting with Nala Abdo, I'm going to ask each of you to give us about 3 minutes on today's topic, the repression of academic freedom and the criminalization of dissent and free expression in support of Palestine on university campuses. And then we're going to talk amongst each other for the next little while. Nala, over to you.
Thank you very much, Desmond, and thank you, Beverly, for organizing this session. Let me begin with an land acknowledgement. I acknowledge that we are, or I am sitting now in the stolen, unceded, and unsurrendered lands of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin peoples or nations. I really want to mention only 2 points here, and in the hopes that I will be, elaborating on them later if there is time. The first point is that we are not really talking about repression in general. We are talking about an exceptionalist repression here. The exceptional place is called Israel. It is the exception when it comes to repression of freedom of academics, repression of any mention of criticism of Israel, criticism of Zionism, and this is why we see the a public now emergence of IHRA, the acceptance of it, and we also I'll go a little bit away from academia to the what is the name of this school, the Sir Robert Borden High School, when a song of peace on peace in Gaza was raised hell because remembrance is only for Canadian fallen, or when it comes to the Holocaust for Jewish only, but for the fallen Palestinian souls, for the fallen women and children, and the tens of thousands of them, you cannot sing for peace for them. So there is a big roar right now going on in Toronto, in Canada, for this. The second point I wanted to raise here is around the repression in academia and the attack on freedom of expression has been going on for a long time. I think it has been going on since the establishment of the state, seriously. We have not noticed it much. We have not done much work around it. We did it in general terms. We did it in various ways, but we did not sort of feel it on our skin, if you want. Most recently, it has emerged in the most brutal form. Now, we know that since the 90s, students in my department at the university have been harassed endlessly, in terms of finding rooms, in terms of, having discussions on Palestine. But I myself have experienced it in the 90s. I've experienced it in, anti-Palestinian racism in, 2022 and, last year, 2023, in the most brutal form of harm that it caused me, my soul, me being, Palestinian, and me being fighting for human rights, fighting for, academic rights. I'm stopping here. I don't know if this is 3 or 10 or whatever. You tell me.
I didn't start the clock, but I appreciate it. I know there's so much to say. I just want to get everybody a little bit warmed up. And now I'm happy you mentioned Sir Robert Borden in Nepean, Ontario, the site of this very ridiculous so-called controversy. I was actually able to interview a student at that school last night, and I will be publishing my conversation with them very soon. So thank you for bringing that up. We'll go
Great.
to Mamadou Tal next. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you so much for my fellow panelists. This is an honor and privilege to be here. I think as someone who has recently been at the other end of the ways in which these institutions can be draconian and carceral, leading, especially targeting students who are in precarious positions, such as international students, I'm constantly forced to ask the question, what is it about the Palestinian cause that elicits such a response, right? And I often ask the question that I've often been saying, that when we say things like Palestine is a litmus test, for me, it's not that we are privileging the Palestinian cause over other causes. It's that we recognize that so many causes converge with Palestine, meaning that from my understanding is that Palestine, for me, holds up a mirror to our institution. And Palestine begs the question, what kind of world do you want to live in? Can we truly live in a world in which international law is rubbish continuously? Our institutions are ignored. Any transnational, multilateral institutions are constantly rubbished and ignored because of, as Nahala said, the exception of one particular country, right? And I keep saying that when we think of these institutions as not as places of learning, but places that reproduce the intellectual arm of the ruling class, when we see that university is a place like this, it makes sense why those who are protesting a genocide are punished in the way that they are, right? It brought to me such a level of cognitive dissonance when I was told in a meeting that we deem you as a public health and safety concern, but that is in connection to my protest against the fifth largest weapons manufacturer in the world, Boeing, right? So the Boeing that's directly involved in taking place, what's happening in Jabalia today, is seen as like welcome. But then it fundamentally goes back to the question that the university wants to produce a particular type of human being in this moment. Someone that is not one of consciousness, someone that does not care too much about what's happening in the world, and someone that will just graduate from these places and hopefully become a donor. People that when you mess that up, or when you challenge that, or when you say, we're going to band together and express our righteous indignation and refusal to be that people, that's when you're punished, right? And because it goes against the status quo, and it goes against what the university wants to be in this time and the type of student they want to create in this time. It's much easier for them to speak about the past, about Vietnam. They'll talk about anti-apartheid struggle in the past. But when you speak about it in contemporary issue, especially when it comes to Palestine, that is met with the most brutal forms of repression that I've seen. And I know that my good old liberal friends keep saying, oh, but academic freedom and freedom of speech. And I'm saying, yes, but you cannot divorce it from Palestine. Because I know if the issue was fossil fuels, it wouldn't be probably met with the same repression. Thank you.
Thank you. And for context for viewers who may not know this, I probably should have highlighted this in my intro. Mamadou at Cornell has been the subject of an extremely public, I would say internationally public, attack by the institution for both being at a pro-Palestine camp and also being present at a fair where companies like Boeing and I believe it was L3 Harris was the other, who were invited onto the campus at Cornell. And because of Mamadou's participation in these events, the school threatened to essentially unenroll him, which would have forced him as an international student to be deported immediately from the United States. But many people spoke up, and you remain on campus, but I understand that I should say you remain in your program, but you're not allowed on campus physically at this time. And we're going to get into all of that, but just a little context for those who may not know that. Sarah, I think you're next.
That's right. Hello, everyone. I feel honored to be part of this panel, and thank you to Scholar Strike Canada for organizing this two-day labor action. In my years as a student organizer at U of T, I've come to see firsthand how academic institutions function as extensions of state power, how they suppress dissent that doesn't align with settler interests. This university claims to be committed to decolonization, except when Indigenous liberation struggles become praxis-oriented. The criminalization of pro-Palestine organizing on campuses is not just an isolated issue. It's part of a broader project to sanitize universities as spaces for depoliticized knowledge production. Our universities are increasingly complicit in imperial violence, not just through their investments in arms companies, but also through their suppression of dissenting voices on campus. For one, U of T claims to care about academic freedom, like Mamadou just said, while its investments are complicit in scholasticide, the annihilation of Gaza's entire educational infrastructure. U of T, going off of what Nala said, also claims to be neutral, committed to neutrality. I want to make it very clear, divestment is neutrality. Neutrality is the bare minimum, but right now U of T has not taken a neutral stance. They are actively investing in weapons manufacturing companies that serve the interests of one side, the Israeli state. When we staged our Palestine Solidarity encampment, the People's Circle for Palestine, the response from admin was swift and it was brutal. Surveillance, threats of expulsion, and coordinated smear campaigns attempting to brand us, students, as racist and anti-Semitic. It is this characterization that attracted Zionist agitators to campus, to the encampment. They put us in real harm's way. From Zionists pulling out knives toward our marshals at the encampment, to razor blades being put in our food. U of T's public characterization of us made agitators feel justified to harm us. The reality is that U of T's response has never been about combating real anti-Semitism. It's been about protecting settler interests both here and in Israel. And let me be very clear. Universities are not neutral institutions. They are deeply entrenched in the neoliberal and colonial project. When we disrupt campus life, we are disrupting the seamless functioning of institutions that profit from war, occupation, genocide, and dispossession. This is why our organizing is so viciously targeted on campuses. The repression we face is meant to make an example of us, to discourage others from also challenging the status quo. U of T's new protest rules that include a ban on affixing signs, posters, or flyers, and this includes the use of chalk, markers, paint, projections on campus, are a direct effort to silence dissent, to suppress dissent, free expression, and any Palestine solidarity on campus. Yet the reality is that our solidarity work is not just about Palestine. It's part of a larger fight against colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, and state violence. And as student encampers, or rather organizers who organize the encampments, we must also reflect upon what it means to occupy land that is already stolen, Indigenous land, and whether Indigenous voices are truly centered in our on-campus efforts. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about as I enter this conversation.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I'm so glad you brought up the notion of objectivity as it's being used and mobilized by a lot of these institutions. We will certainly return to that idea. Next, Mohammed, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Desmond, to Beverly, all the organizers, all the people doing the work behind the scenes as well to organize this two-day event and this panel. And we're glad to be sharing it with my esteemed colleagues here. So let me try to address two big questions, but let me try to do them quickly in 3 minutes. Why is Israel, the Israeli state, and the Israeli lobby pushing so hard for criminalization, not just censorship and marginalization of dissent, but criminalization of the Palestinian critique of Zionism in Israel? Simple, because they're losing the argument. They have no facts. They have no logic. They have no validity. They have nothing in terms of the actual argumentation. The academic scholarship is becoming extremely clear on the question of Israeli settler colonialism and the genocide of the Palestinian people. Civil society is becoming extremely outspoken, I shouldn't say extremely, but more and more outspoken about that reality. And the Zionist and the Israeli lobby has nothing in return other than propaganda that people see through. It's quite weak stuff. And so they answer with the only thing that they know, which is force. They have, as Nahla said, they've been marginalizing and censoring Palestinian critiques of Zionism in Israel for decades and decades and decades. But now that's not enough, because the story is still getting out. And they want the Palestinian story eliminated. They don't want Palestinians as a political sovereign identity and as a political story to survive. They need it to be eliminated in order for them to complete their settler colonial conquest of Palestine. And so they are moving into criminalization and institutionalization that will make it virtually impossible for even academics to claim protection from academic freedom to make arguments and reveal reality. And that's what settler colonies do. They conceal reality. They conceal the reality of violence in order to propagate it. So that means that universities, and this is the second question, is why do universities in Western spaces like Canada, the US, and elsewhere go along with this? They don't do it because they're afraid of the Israel lobby. Individuals might say, oh, I'm afraid of hurting my career. I want to become president of this university or keep my job provost, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not ultimately the reason why this is being done by these institutions. Universities are conservative institutions. I don't mean politically, ideologically conservative, but conservative in the sense that their job is to not rock the boat of the state. They exist within the state. They are part and parcel of the state, and they don't go out of their way to question the foundations of the state in any significant way. This is why they're fake on decolonization, anti-racism, and Palestine shows that better than any other. There's just no gray area here, and there's no ambiguity. It shows that better than any other cause, precisely because they take such an extreme outwardly repressive position on it from the beginning, precisely because Palestine is inherently a decolonizing struggle and cause. Universities, as conservative institutions, continue to repress, not for just the interests of the Israeli state, but to protect the interests of US empire and Western imperialism. And therefore, the student encampments have done the right thing over the last year. They've let go of this whole approach of going to Canadian institutions, American institutions, and saying, well, can you please live up to the ideals that you stand for on the question of apply to Palestine what you apply to everyone else? That was always wrong because it wasn't accurate. They never stood up for those ideals. They didn't stand up for them, in decolonization struggles, in anti-racist struggles, in anti-imperial struggles. They don't stand up for them now. And the students have switched the language, and they're saying, you know what? You are complicit. You are complicit in colonialism, settler colonialism, and imperialism and racism. And we need to actually start calling that out and putting pressure on these institutions. This is necessary. The legitimacy of these institutions does need to be called into question. And that's what these student encampments have been doing over the last year and will, I think, continue to do. And in my view, and maybe we can talk about this later, but in my view, there is a crisis of legitimacy looming for the university down the line, a serious one. And it won't be just for the university. The mainstream media is going to get it first, probably. But at any rate, there's a crisis of legitimacy looming, and they will only have themselves to blame. Thank you.
Thank you. As someone practicing journalism in this country for the last almost 15 years, I didn't know the Canadian media had any legitimacy left as far as mainstream goes, but never mind. We are going to go finally now to Sanera Tovani. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I would also like to thank Scholar Strike for organizing this event, this series of panels. I'd like to thank Beverly for getting in touch with me, inviting me, all the organizers. Desmond, thank you to you for hosting the panel, to all my co-panelists as well. You've all made such excellent points. I would like to first acknowledge that I live and work on Coast Salish territories. And, as I said, so many excellent points have already been made. I just want to make 3 points before, we go into our joint discussion. The first is that it's really important that this panel is linking academic freedom to the right to dissent, the right to protest. Because, of course, in academic freedom and the right to protest, to dissent, have historically been linked in anti-colonial and anti-racist thought and praxis. Neither one of these rights has been willingly extended to scholars working in these fields who have actually led the struggle to democratize the university. And so when we are organizing to end the genocide in Gaza, we are also working to democratize this institution and the other institutions that are attached to it. So both these rights, the right to protest and the right to academic freedom, are once again under fierce attack. And Nahla is, of course, right that this has been an ongoing attack on the issue of Palestine, but we now see an escalation because of the level of mobilization and organization on campuses itself. So that is one point. The second point I want to make is that Palestine is the overriding struggle of our times in every measure, in terms of, political issues, legal, ethical, epistemological. Palestine is now at the heart of all of the struggles of our times. The Palestinian resistance has exposed the deep contradiction between liberal democracy and US imperialism. And of course, Israel is a proxy state of the US in the Middle East. Palestinian resistance has also demonstrated that Western support for rights and the rule of law is applicable only to the point that it furthers the interests of Western powers, of Western domination. Palestine has also exposed that those who have the biggest military decide what the law is. And the Palestinian resistance has also exposed that the driving ideology in global politics today is the racial colonial ideology of white supremacy, including Zionist supremacy, that is now the governing ideology in global politics. And of course, Palestine is exposed that this ruling ideology relies on the utter dehumanization of colonized peoples, of Palestinians as a colonized people. But this is the treatment of Palestinians today is directly linked to centuries of colonial genocide, colonial massacres, and Palestine has revealed that historical continuity. Palestine has also revealed that Western states and institutions across the board, university, media, arts, publishing, we could go on and on, are deeply involved in upholding this violence and in legitimizing it. And I think this is why the attack on Palestinian organizing has become so intense on our campuses. In Canada, of course, Palestine also exposes that the university and state project of Indigenous reconciliation is really quite meaningless when it comes to global politics. And this Palestinian resistance, this is my third point, has of course galvanized people's movements around the world who are horrified at this violence. Palestine has now transformed a whole new generation for whom this has become the defining moment of their politicization, of their introduction to international politics, and for their understanding of the nature of the state and institutions under which they live and by which they are governed. And there can be no reversal of this understanding, of this politicization. And this generation is saying, not in our name. And what is really significant about this mobilization is that it is so wide-ranging. It is a coalitional politics that cuts across racial lines, against gender lines, against national lines. This really is a global uprising in support of the Palestinian cause. And this transformation is so visible everywhere. And this is the reason that the attack on academic freedom, the right to dissent, the right to mobilize, is escalating so quickly and so rapidly. It is not the weakness of the Palestinian resistance and of solidarity movements that is evident in this escalation of attacks on academic freedom and dissent. It is the power of these movements that is evident in the university's attempt at this moment to clamp down and destroy these movements, even at the cost of inciting violence against student protesters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow. We are often polite in Canada, or at least we are given the stereotype that we are polite. I'm asking my panelists now to not be polite for this part of the discussion. I just want you to jump in whenever you're prompted, whenever you feel like there's something you want to add to this incredibly rich set of introductions now that we have heard. And I think I want to go back to Nala, and we won't go in any specific order again after this, just whoever feels moved to speak. And Nala, it was, I believe, 3 years ago now, in 2021, that you were giving a talk, and you were talking about, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. You were talking about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism more broadly, and you had a warning, and I want to quote you. You said, "This fight is part of the global anti-racist and anti-colonial struggle, and this is why Carleton and all other universities must reject the IHRA definition and respect people's right to struggle against all forms of racism, including anti-Semitism and Zionism. Otherwise, we risk endangering freedom of expression, academic freedoms, the jobs, futures, lives of many students, faculty, and staff." It is as if you were looking through a window into this exact moment where we have arrived. So I was just wanting you to open this part of the discussion by reflecting on how much further we've gone beyond just that definition being a tool to threaten students, staff, faculty, but this moment in history that we are witnessing being used to suppress all kinds of forms of speech and expression.
I would go even further. First of all, thank you for your memory. I don't have that memory. I forgot what I said then. Although I'm sure it's somewhere there actually recorded. I also added something about the Azrieli buildings that we have in the university. These are buildings that were donated by someone, forgot his first name, Azrieli. And we read his book, actually, where he has taken part, literally, in the genocide of Palestinians in 1948. And this man donates money to Carleton University, and they have 3 buildings named after him. After the renaming of, the Ryerson into, Metropolitan Toronto University, we launched a huge campaign of denaming Azrieli. Now, at the time, I remember that I mispronounced Azrieli into Israeli. BB or Bnai Brait, okay? Bnai Brait basically wrote a huge thing about me as anti-Semitic because I'm saying that Israelis have money, but Palestinians don't have money. And they went personally to the president of the university and, put a claim against me and asked him at the time or the administration to fire me. But I was never told by the administration about anything. So they did not discuss it with me. They just discussed it with him or with them. I don't know who else went there. So this is one way of harassing you, but you are kept, deaf and silent and, outside of the picture, although the picture is about you. Now, how did it go further? Just last year, December of last year, one of my colleagues sent, claimed against me to the administration that I, whatever, harassed her or caused risk to the students, to the Jewish students, of course. Why? By being critical of Israel and of Zionism, as simple as that. Yes, after a month, but she put me through hell for 6 months. But after 1 month, she withdrew because she knew she has absolutely no point. Nonetheless, and this person actually is claiming to be neutral or objective or whatever these terms that they use this day to take themselves off mess that they have created to themselves, etc. Now, has the situation changed into worse? Maybe not, personally with me, because it hasn't worked so far. I'm still teaching, and I teach Palestine, and I teach, anti-racism, and I teach anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism. But have, the students being harassed more and more? Yes. A group of students and faculty, we have faculty for Palestine almost in many, actually, universities in Canada. In my department, we have a strong cadre of faculty who, some of them, together with students, put together an exhibition called Silenced by Scholasticide. Brilliant work. It took them 6 months to put it together. And it was supposed to be shown or showed in the library. And it was agreed upon. A couple of months before that, the library said, no, we cannot put the exhibition there because risk management, which is something I've never heard of before, to tell you the truth. Risk management said, we cannot put it there. It's risky. Now, for whom risky, God knows. And then we said, okay, don't put the exhibition there, but let, the opening of it, which is, panel by faculty and students on the exhibition itself. They agreed. And then once again, a letter from the provost saying that, sorry, the risk management decided that we cannot hold it in the library either. So they sent it to the, students' place, actually, to university students, whatever, where people eat and, sit outside and enjoy. Now, we did the whole thing. We did the panel and we did the exhibition, and it was successful in terms of, but the way these students who have worked their hearts and minds to produce, this kind of exhibition, it was an excellent. It just talks about schools, about universities, about teachers and professors who were killed, who were assassinated, and the number of students. It has everything to do with the university. But because it is about Palestinians, it was rejected formally. So yes, the attack is really being galvanized by now. The attack on freedoms of expression, the attack on everything. Again, with the exception, just when it comes to criticism of Zionism, Israel, and support of Palestine and their resistance.
I want to pick up on this because, listen, Eric, I told you all to jump in. Now you're doing it. Go right ahead.
I can wait. I just wanted to add something more about the
Please go ahead.
definition. So just to provide a kind of longer context to what Nala is saying, the redefining of anti-Semitism, that is now the IHRA definition, actually began right after the attacks of 9/11. And the attempt to redefine anti-Semitism as criticism, any criticism of Israeli state policy, and to hold Muslims uniquely responsible for anti-Semitism was part of the early discourse of the war on terror. And at that time, there were liberals and conservatives, pro-Zionists, who came together, including feminists, who argued that the US should also attack and partner with Israel and attack Palestinians. So this has a longer trajectory. And I think when we look at this moment of what is happening with the genocide in Gaza, I see this as the latest phase as the global war on terror. And the IHRA is a definite kind of link to that moment when the Israeli-US alliance was greatly strengthened by conservatives, neoconservatives, liberals, and even many, many liberal feminists. And so I don't think we can look at the IHRA redefinition of anti-Semitism without seeing how it is now kind of grounded in an Islamophobic politics.
Can I actually also jump in on that one? Because I think it's important. Actually, it's longer than that. It actually is longer than that. The concept of the new anti-Semitism that starts to emerge in the 1960s, 1970s. And the new, quote unquote, new anti-Semitism is about basically weaponizing anti-Semitism in the service of the Israeli state, where they're starting to connect all serious critiques, what I call in my work, the Palestinian critique of Zionism in Israel, with anti-Semitism. That starts there under labor governments in Israel. In the 1980s, Benjamin Netanyahu starts to run with this and starts to do the work to set up the association of the Palestinian struggle with quote unquote Islamist terrorist ideology. He starts that work in the 1980s. He helps organize conferences between think tanks and starts that automatic association in the public's mind between Palestinian resistance and Islamist terrorism. And he starts to turn it into this religious conflict, which is, of course, it is not. And then that gets accelerated after 9/11. But he played a really long game and was setting it up as an individual even. But the state itself has been working on this since the 1960s. But Benjamin Netanyahu himself has been kind of foreseeing this and planning this and projecting into the future. You know, the quote unquote Muslim terrorists as the primal enemy of Western civilization. And so this doesn't happen by accident, and it is part of a longer project. But again, let's just be clear that this is a pure weaponization of anti-Semitism in the service of the Israeli state. That should be the response to people who go, "Oh, I don't feel safe about critiques of Israel." I think the response to that should be, "No, it's not anti-Semitic, and these are the reasons why. This is the academic work that shows why it's not." And moving on, we're going to critique Israel and live with it. That needs to become the response more and more often. Until hopefully at one point we pressure the institution itself to have that response. But I think we need to be very upfront about this weaponization of anti-Semitism and call it out, because it is ultimately a danger for the fight against real anti-Semitism as well.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Sarah and Momadou on this, because like I'm struck by the idea, and I think Mohanad spoke to this earlier about, you know, the idea that you're losing the argument when the only thing you can do is try to silence and punish people who are making it. To either of you, what do you make of this reality that there don't seem to be a lot of resistance to the resistance on campuses that says, we want to talk to you. We disagree with you. We think you've got it wrong. We think that you're misguided. It so often goes to, you should be fired, you should be suspended, you should be expelled, you should be punished and kicked out of the institution, punished socially for your ideas. And this like gap that we have in a place that's supposed to be fostering debate and discussion, where none is actually seemingly possible in this moment.
Right, I can go first. I mean, I'm at a university that has publicly rejected the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, but it still applies it when it comes to repressing students and or pushing back against any critique of the Israeli state, the so-called Israeli state. And this kind of ties into what Dr. Ayash mentioned in his introduction. You know, we can't convince administrators or the ruling class or this institution to care, you know, about our liberation. They do function and exist as an extension of this settler colonial state. Our freedom or our liberation is in direct opposition to their dominance. And so our job as students, especially, or as members of, this academic community, is to bring forward the internal contradictions that exist, to build alternate systems that don't rely on these institutions and push them almost into a corner where now it's no longer in their interest to maintain and uphold these violent relationships. And if people, like Dr. Ayashi were saying, if people say that they feel unsafe, well, then we have to tell them the difference between being uncomfortable and being unsafe, because you're not unsafe on campus if if there's pro-Palestine sentiment or if there's organizing that's aligned with the Palestinian liberation movement. In fact, it's Gazans who are unsafe. It is Palestinian students facing anti-Palestinian racism who are unsafe on our campuses. And coming to your point about the long-term impact as well of this repression, consequences in my mind include the erosion of, critical inquiry and intellectual freedom on university campuses if they continue to suppress dissent. This doesn't only harm Palestinian students or pro-Palestine students, it diminishes or can diminish the role of the university as a space for genuine debate and critique. There's already this increased self-censorship we see among professors, among academics and students alike. And this can lead to a homogenization of thought that aligns with, state and corporate interests. It's a real threat, and it's one that we must name. And I'm not even going into the emotional and the psychological toll that this anti-Palestinian racism and this repression has had on racialized students, on students who exist at the margins, who are, international students who are navigating precarious conditions related maybe to immigration, to financial status. And so the threat's real, and it's important to name it and to organize in response to it.
Go ahead, Mamadou.
No, absolutely. And I think this it's so like deep when it comes to places like Cornell, right? Because we've seen the disparity in response to who even gets to feel unsafe, right? I remember during the encampments, we overheard Hillel students asking the administration to bring the National Guard in. And this was like an hour before they were telling me this encampment makes me feel unsafe. And I was like, well, I think my fellow colleagues calling for the National Guard to be brought in makes me feel unsafe, right? In addition to that, even the rhetoric that we're surrounding, I remember, so for example, we had a very intense negotiation session with the chief financial officer of Cornell surrounding divestment. And he was essentially saying, we are not going to move an inch on any of your demands if you continue to say there is only one solution, intifada, revolution, right? And he wouldn't, so I was trying to go into with him, and what kind of makes us even think you're going mad? Just a couple months before, these are the same individuals that paid Ann Coulter $40,000 to come to Cornell and give a talk, right? Ann Coulter has a laundry list history of anti-Semitic tropes, anti-Semitic claims. And I literally juxtaposed that. And I said, okay, you are making a claim that this chant, and again, we reject this whole notion of October the 7th being the most Jews killed since the Holocaust. There's not a trajectory or history that connects Nazi Germany to Palestinian people, right? I reject the premise entirely. There's not history that combines these people at all. That's the first thing. So when I said that, okay, you're saying that your sticking point and you're not going to move on anything as long as we pronounce these words. I quoted, and I had this recorded, I quoted back to them. Ann Coulter has said explicitly, Jews run the world. I asked him, is this hate speech? Is this anti-Semitic? He said, no, that's protected speech. That is protected speech. But the chant is anti-Semitic because it has one solution and it resembles final solution. But again, it speaks to the ways in which Europe is able to, and white supremacy is able to absolve itself for its own crimes. And now has made us the people who, as if to say, we were the people that engineered the Holocaust. And we were the people that have a long history of anti-Semitism. And I just reject it. And then I think finally, it really goes, recently there was about 200 parents of Hillel students met up in a private call, which was believed to be a private call with admin and with administration, right? Just to note that administration never meets parents of Muslim students, or hardly does, seldom meets parents of Black students. But anyway, this was like a call in which they thought was private. And the parents had issues with only 3 people on campus. all of them, two of them happened to be Black and Muslim. One of them was myself. They were saying, why is this person allowed to teach? And also two other Black faculty. And I think, again, this is another trend we're seeing. Why is APAC constantly primarying Black senators, Black Congress people, right? And I keep telling people, this is the way we're drawing the links between anti-Zionism and not just anti-Palestinian sentiment, which is the root, which is its kind of bread and butter, but also anti-Blackness is very heavily featured into Zionism as well.
Thank you for that. Something that your struggle, Mamadou, has highlighted for me, and you brought up divestment, is this really hard balancing act that students and professors and people on campus have had to try and do, where on the one hand, you're trying to put the focus on companies like Harris, L3 Harris, and excuse me, Boeing, right? And many others who are actively arming the state of Israel right now. We in Canada seem to be sensitive to this issue because we have, at least in title, we've said that we've frozen arms shipments to Israel. Now, there are a lot of loopholes, right, that allow us to continue sending arms. But at least in principle, the Canadian government seems to acknowledge that, yes, there is something problematic about this endless supply of weapons. But while people are trying to talk about that and talk about divestment, they're being physically attacked. They're being psychologically attacked. And I wonder if somebody here wants to speak to this balance that people have to do of both trying to keep the focus on divestment while enduring this onslaught of accusations of anti-Semitism, of accusations of hate speech. And how do we balance those things and what you've seen, what you've been experiencing?
If I may, actually, we have a good experience, and for the first time, I think a successful one at Carleton University, where we submitted the whole BDS actually motion to CUWASA. CUWASA is our union, the union of faculty. And lo and behold, we won the vote of the members. So that was probably one of the very early winning, of course, something to work on for months, how to, put the words and what words you avoid and what words you put together and, which concepts, it was quite something. But we also lost this motion at the Senate. And, the same people who were against this motion at the Senate are the same people who are against this motion at CUWASA, except that, CUWASA, I don't know, we kept resisting and we wanted to achieve something. The point I want to make is that whether we need to keep the hope that our role, not only as academics and students who work only within, the confines there, but as public speakers, students outside, faculty outside, we write things, we do all of these things. This is very important. It's very important. I really believe it keeps the Palestinian struggle on, and it keeps it alive, because we killed everyone in Gaza, right? We killed everyone in Dahia, which is the southern part of Beirut. We killed, we devastated the southern part of Lebanon. I mean, anyone who listens, and we don't admit as Israelis that we lost. We don't admit that, we were attacked. So in other words, there is this attempt at fabricating what actually is happening throughout the world. When the students went out in the encampment and they were harassed and forced to, take away the encampment by the most democratic state in the world, the US, and in Canada and everywhere else, actually. Somehow, the Western democracy really totally collapsed. We knew from the beginning it did not really exist when it comes to vital issues. And the vital issue right now, and for the past, whatever it is, but right now, the vital issue is Palestine, and keep the Palestinian voice alive. I wanted to, come to this point. I'm not directly responding to your question, but I really wanted to come to this point of how important it is to keep the Palestinian struggle alive with our voices here in Canada and everywhere else, as academics, in the academy, as well as outside of the academy, with, everything possible. For example, the recent visit of Francesca Albanese, who wrote a brilliant report. We haven't seen it yet, but she came. She was harassed in Montreal, almost canceled her event and reinstated it, but she had a huge audience in Ottawa. It was really a fabulous panel that was there. Not really panel, but sort of discussion on the table there. So something, and she talked about settler colonialism and genocide.
Mhm.
And this is the United Nations. Now we know what Israel, how Israel responds to the United Nations. For Israel, even Guterres is anti-Semitic. The UN is anti-Semitic. ICC is anti-Semitic. Every international law is anti-Semitic. And it's not the war of, this is what we need to remember. It's not Israeli war. It is imperialist war, mainly a US war.
Yes.
Israel, as I think, I'm not sure who said it, most likely, Sunera is the proxy there. It is the tool that implements the imperialist interest in the area. And we have to be clear about that. And this is why our voice needs to stay, loud and clear,
Yes.
because our cause is a just one. Palestinian cause is a just one. It's a human one. And we need to preserve that.
Yes, I want to echo Nala's word here and really support it. The biggest kind of task of the moment is to stop the genocide, is to bring the genocide to an end. And, we can have a discussion about, this kind of longer term global war on terror, which has been unfolding. We can talk about how Palestine was also at the heart of the Third World Revolution. And now we are seeing the revival of those politics around the world, the incomplete revolution of the mid-20th century in the Third World Revolution is now once again awakening, and it is coming alive, and we need to have this long-term understanding of the political moment we're in. Of course, there will be attacks on individuals, on particular groups organizing in particular sites, because the institutions will want to make an example of us, to silence others from also joining in, speaking out. And this has been, this is how power works. I mean, I remember when I spoke out against the Afghan war, and there were, I was investigated for a hate crime against Americans of all things, but 10 years on, it's now, and even longer now, it's the common view that this was a disastrous mistake. And we have to see ourselves as the voices of the future, right? But we can only do that effectively if we have this long historical perspective on what these fights are about, how dissent works, how to survive these kinds of attacks, what kind of coalitions to build. And yes, I think in terms of white supremacy and the link between Zionist and Zionist supremacy, you're right, Muhammad, it goes back much earlier. What we see in the 1960s and even earlier is the redefining of Western racial politics, so that the West, after the Holocaust, after the founding of Israel, represents itself now as a Judeo-Christian civilization, right? And white racial politics become transformed in that moment. And we're seeing how white supremacy now works in the US, in Canada, everywhere across Europe, but also with this very deep alliance with the Zionist and Zionist supremacy. So when we talk about racial politics, it's really important to know that white supremacy itself transforms over time. It's just not articulated or expressed in one political, voice or articulation. It keeps shifting, and now Palestine is at the heart of not just the unfinished Third World Revolution, but also the collapse of this whole neoliberal project, which is what we are living through at the moment. And Palestine might well prove to be kind of the death blow to the decline of neoliberalism.
I want to give Mohammed a chance to come in here because I know you've got to leave in a couple of minutes. We're less than 10 minutes from the end, and I want to remind everybody that right after this, to close out Scholar Strike, Elle Jones is going to be joining us to do some poetry. Do not miss that. Please stick around. Mohammed, if I can pose something to you, we've heard about neutrality during this conversation, and I just kind of wanted to ask you why you think that is such a favored tool of institutions who are clearly running cover for pro-Israel points of view. Why not just simply state the obvious, which is that these institutions are deeply sympathetic to the Israeli government's aggression towards Palestinian? Why the need for the false presentation of a neutral stance?
Very good question. The reason is simple. The reality is too brutal to reveal. The reality is genocide and the complete destruction of Palestinian life. Institutions know that they cannot survive long if they come out and say that that's what they do. So they conceal. This is a marquee feature of colonial modernity, of imperial projects, of colonial projects, of enslavement. The Europeans did the quote unquote scramble for Africa to quote unquote end slavery. I mean, this is what the whole discourse was. So we've seen this before, and universities would much prefer to continue to look as if they are this progressive institution, a civilized institution, one that stands for human rights and equality and belonging and inclusion and anti-racism and all the rest of it, because that's what is accepted around the world as ideals that we should all be striving for. So when you present yourself that way, as an institution, you can't just then step back from that and say, well, the reality is that the Israelis need to commit this brutal genocide. It just doesn't work within these institutions. They won't last long if they admit to the reality of their violence. So they operate in obfuscation of reality. The neutrality is not just that, or the claim to neutrality is not just that. It's also a way for them not just to clean their hands of the genocide, but also to present themselves as, all of a sudden they become extremely ineffectual and helpless. You'd think these universities are just these poor little creatures that can't help, they can't force change. What are they going to do? They're just a little old university. They're not powerful, right? All of a sudden they become extremely weak and extremely unable to change anything about politics or the world when it comes to this question, precisely because they don't want to do anything to change it. Ultimately, what we're confronted with here is a situation where the mechanisms that Western institutions in general, certainly the university is part of that, the mechanisms that they usually use to conceal their active participation in brutal structural violences are increasingly not working. And the Palestinian case shows that better than most other cases, because it is just so stark. The propaganda versus the reality is just so easy to see. This is why the younger generation, the students, are not buying any of it, because for them, you're right, Desmond, there's no legitimacy for the mainstream media at all. They're not buying into it, but there's still too many from other generations following it. So that's why the biggest crisis of legitimacy for mainstream media is, I think, still coming. But with the younger generation, it's not there because they look at the headlines, they look at the videos from the ground, and they're like, nah, something's not right here. Someone's been lying to me.
Most
So,
definitely.
sorry?
I said most definitely.
Yeah. And now we're in this situation where there's this mechanism that usually conceals violence, allowing it to continue, is no longer really working. So what is the response of institutions? Is to repress and call in the state police, calling the state violence to come in, remove encampments, and not just the police, but the legal system. Using repression and force. And I expect that universities will intensify down this path moving forward. I don't think we've seen the worst of it even just yet. I think things are going to get worse. But what usually happens with these kinds of repressions is that it's going to invite even more resistance. It never has the desired effect of eradicating resistance. So this is why I am betting on a crisis of legitimacy, because the more they repress, the more their legitimacy is questioned, the more, this future I don't know who of these student generation here is going to be excited to give money back to the university as alumni. I don't know how many of them are going to continue to engage with the university as a space that, that they're going to be invested in. There are some consequences that are coming down the line. Genocide always has consequences, and there's going to be some in this case. Many of them are very difficult to predict now. For consequences to happen, we do need people to stay committed, learn from the Palestinian Sumud, learn steadfast perseverance. Don't be frustrated that you've not been able to stop the genocide. Don't be frustrated that you haven't seen the decolonization of Palestine just yet. Palestinians have been in this for over 100 years. Indigenous people have been in their struggle for way longer than that. They're still going. We're going to keep going. So commit yourself for life to the Palestinian struggle. I hope it doesn't take your entirety of your life, especially for those who are younger. But be prepared, mentally prepare yourself to go the distance and pass it on to your kids. If you're learning anything from the Palestinians now, make sure that it's that, and continue to the struggle, because so long as our story remains alive, the cause remains alive. And I'll end it at that. I apologize that I can't say it for the last 5 minutes, but I've just spent an entire day in a workshop in Sweden here, and I've got to get going. But thank you all so much for hosting this, best of luck with the rest of the presentations and the rest of the talks. Thank you.
Thank you for your incredible contribution today, Mohammed. Be safe and take care. I think I'll go Sarah, Mamadou, and then Nala, as we close out. Let's go with Sarah first, if you would.
Sure. Coming back to your point about folks organizing for Palestine being reduced to anti-Semitic, I want to name that reducing the Palestinian liberation movement, or again, people organizing for Palestine, to being anti-Semitic is deeply racist. It is anti-Palestinian racism. And an example at UFT is that, our university took us to court via the injunction, and they had quite literally requested for the judge to rule that students take permission before protesting into the future. Of course, the judge didn't grant this to them, but the judge did rule that we were not, in fact, anti-Semitic. The slogans that were mentioned earlier, glory to the martyrs, river to the sea, intifada, the judge ruled that these are not anti-Semitic terms or phrases at all. And so that did serve us, and I hope that it serves community members as well. Still, we see, professors and academics become increasingly hesitant to engage in critical discussions on Palestine for the fear of losing their jobs, their funding, their tenure. Students coming back to those, with precarious immigration status are now facing threats to their academic standing, to their scholarships. This criminalization of dissent extends far beyond the academic sphere, far beyond campus, into professional repercussions now as well. My career prospects, for one, have shifted as a result of doxing, and many are in the same position. And so in thinking about repression, we must also think about livelihoods being impacted, intellectual freedom being impacted, and the future of academic institutions and academia as a space for critical inquiry. And so those are a few of the thoughts that I'm sitting with right now after listening to Dr. Ayash, Abdul, Mamadou, and Dr. Tabani as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Mamadou?
Yeah, thank you so much. Just to kind of echo what Sarah was saying is that I'm honestly just sick and tired of the global gaslighting, because no one is losing their job for being pro-Israeli. People are losing their jobs for being pro-Palestinian. No one is being threatened to be deported because of their being pro-Israeli speech, but they are being have the threat of deportation and being physically attacked for being pro-Palestinian. No one is losing tenure for being taken a pro-Israeli stance, but people are losing tenure and being denied tenure and being kicked out of the universities for being pro-Palestinian. So and again, we just to kind of take away from academia, we saw the way the legacy media dealt with the Maccabi fans in Amsterdam recently. Right, we saw the way legacy media continuously lied, edited, changed their story, because it's much more a sexier story to have Arabs and Muslims be anti-Semitic. They actually talk about what is going on the ground to divorce it from the conversation about Palestine. So I just said, just to reiterate, I'm tired of the global gaslighting, and I just think fundamentally we can push back against claims of anti-Semitism. It's going to come anyways, right? I take it as a badge of honor that I'm on Canary mission. I take it as a badge of honor that I'm on this play. I think if you're not on Canary mission, you're not doing enough for Palestine, if I'm being honest, because you should be going hard in such a way that your enemies perceive you as an enemy, as a threat. And I think fundamentally, the only way we win this is that we lose our fear and continue to come together and say, okay, if there's so many of us doing this thing, they can't get everyone, no matter how they try, right? But again, it's about losing that fear. I'm just tired of they're going to call me what they're going to call me at the end of the day. They're going to call us what they're going to tell us at the end of the day. They're going to keep obfuscating. They're going to keep lying about what's taking place. So it's either we play into this game of what Toni Morrison said, that racism here to exhaust you by being reactionary, or you say, you know what, you call me what you want, but this is about a genocide and this is about Palestine. And that's it.
Sunera, I'm going to actually give you the last word after Nala, because you came last at the opening, and I think it's only fair. So stand by, and Nala, I'm going to go to you one last time.
Very few words, actually, basically to re-emphasize once again that we all here, with every word that we have uttered so far, we are basically a resistant group. We are resisting the dehumanization of Palestinians. We are resisting the invisibilization of the Palestinians. We are resisting the fact that, the whole world now is not looking or treating Palestinians as humans, is not looking at Palestinians as equals to human beings, worldwide. And we are here because we resist this. And when we resist this, we also resist those who make the Palestinians, their victims. We are resisting the Israeli settler colonial apartheid regime and state, as well as army, as well as society by now, because this state has created such a brutal society altogether. This is not the Israeli society that, I knew some time back. It has gone way to the not only right, that the term right even is incorrect here. It has gone towards, a brutal way of looking at human beings like Palestinians as cockroaches. Now, we know that they have said that, many years ago. The presidents and vice, and prime ministers and ministers have referred to us as cockroaches in a bottle, even not, not in the sky. Referred to us as, inhuman, as terrorists until now. Okay, but we know that we are none of these. We are human beings who deserve to be free on their own land. And our own land has been occupied and colonized since the establishment of the State of Israel. And this is what the whole world needs to understand now. And we will continue to fight for our freedom. We will continue to fight for our humanity, until whatever, until we drop. So this is what, this group represents here, and what, various other groups before that. We also were together on this, sort of forum, talking about the same thing. What Sunera has done in terms of bringing in the role, which is shameful, of white feminists, especially Western feminists, actually, in this. Not a word, nothing. They don't exist, they don't hear, they don't see. Where are they? We've asked the same question a year ago, or something like a year ago. And since then, they're not there. The power of Zionism, of fascism, of, imperialism is so strong that has led anti-racist, anti-imperialist, anti-colonial fighters, like we know them, and they have always existed. They've rendered them, totally voiceless.
Yes.
So this is what we are fighting, and we shall and will continue to fight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Over to you, Sunera.
Thank you. So Nala, thank you for bringing the point up about Western feminists and the feminist movement. It's nowhere to be seen at this moment. And when the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism was being developed after 9/11, Western feminists were leading that development, and they were leading the institutionalization of this discourse. So we must never forget that. I want to make the point that the university is a site of struggle, that we cannot give it up as a site of struggle, and that in the university, those of us who are fighting against this genocide are the future. We are the voice of the future. We're the voice of the future of the institution as well. Public opinion has turned against the whole Zionist narrative around the world. It has been shattered, and there is no going back on that. That narrative will never have the power that it once did, and that is a huge, huge accomplishment. And even now, Palestinians in Gaza, after all the violence, after the involvement of all the Western powers, are still fighting back. And Palestine will be won in Palestine. And we have to make sure that we support that struggle as best as we can with all the resources that are available to us, but Palestine will be won in Palestine. Thank you.
I've got to say thank you. I don't even know how to begin to thank everybody for this incredible discussion. Let me ask our folks behind the scenes that we did get 2 questions come in, and I know we are over time. We did start late. Do we have time to very briefly field 2 questions? This is for okay, they're giving us 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to ask these 2 questions, and I don't think I'll get time to get everybody to answer them, but let's see how we do. First of all, a question from Justin. Thank you so much for this discussion. I wondered if any of you have thoughts regarding the phenomenon of online doxing or blacklisting by private or secret organizations, such as Canary Mission. That's one question. The other is from Amina. Thank you all for this amazing discussion. Could anyone speak to the role of private security in this repression or reflect any similar practices at our schools? So if anyone wants to take on briefly, very briefly, the issue either of doxing and online harassment by private organizations such as Canary Mission, or the use of private security, I'll give you about a minute to take that on. Any thoughts?
I can speak really quickly to private security. At U of T, the university has spent upwards of $4.1 million on suing its students and hiring security to surveil us at the encampment and beyond. This is money that could have been put toward supporting students struggling on campus, toward community members suffering as a result of the gentrification that this university has been, part of. When we went to court, again, U of T put forward unsubstantiated incidents of anti-Semitism and violence that none of their private security guards could substantiate or back up. And so, private security, we have folks across campus who, like we have Palestinian students and pro-Palestine students who are followed to and from classes, who are constantly harassed, stopped, surveilled. And so they've definitely leaned on both campus safety and hiring outside security to do that and to maintain repression on campus and to intimidate and harass students.
Yeah.
Well,
I can speak briefly. Oh, sorry. No, please, Nala, go.
Very quickly about doxing, especially with Canary Mission. I think we're lucky. 3 of us or 4 of us who are on this panel actually are already on Canary Mission. I was added recently. I was upset before because my name, did not appear among my colleagues, among the people I respect, among the people who have, who have raised their voices against settler colonialism, against apartheid. But now among these people. Now, this online doxing, this attempt at scaring us. I mean, who is Canary Mission? Yes, you go online and you find my name there and I speak there and you put me on your list. Then what is, what's coming up? I mean, more than what the universities have been doing, more than what the institutions have been doing, more than what Canada has allowed to be done in Canada or the US allowed to be done in the US in support of Israel. What else is there? You have killed hundreds of thousands of people. What are you doing? What is more to expect from this? Just putting our name together. Well, we are together anyway. It's just a list that, shows Sunera beside Nahla, beside Muhannad, beside etc. I mean, I look at it and sometimes I laugh. It's not, I mean, we should not be scared, seriously, unless something more is hidden there. But let's wait to see. And that should not scare us or silence us. These are means and tools of silencing. Okay? Let's not be silenced by these, fishy tools. Israel has been silencing the whole world with what Ilan Pappy says, the 10 myths of the very existence of Israel. Israel has been established on myths, on lies, on fabrications, and it continues to come up with them. And this is from the voice of an Israeli historian. So, let's face reality.
And just to add, as someone who's also been doxxed by Canary Mission, I'd say 2 things. Practically, we give it way too much weight and way too much power than it actually has. Because yes, some doors may close, but also some doors remain open and will open because of your stance that you take. And depends, and fundamentally it's a question of what kind of role do you want to go into in the future that says if you're silent on a genocide, then you will be punished for your career. And then fundamentally, I think I am more afraid of what it means to be silent on the genocide and what I lose in terms of my humanity than any career will ever offer me in my lifetime. Yeah. So yeah, Canary Mission is not that deep.
And if I may really quickly as well, I agree. And I only realized that after a job interview where Canary Mission was cited and where I was questioned on my ethics. And in that moment, I just knew that, speaking up and out against a genocide is what matters more and what will always matter more than getting doxxed or by folks trying to harass us behind a screen.
And I just say, last
sentence we've got to end.
No, there'll never come a time ever in my life that I think to myself, oh my God, I went too hard for Palestine. So yeah.
I think that is a good place to end. I think that the reflection that I have leaving this conversation and these last thoughts is about paying the price for what we believe in. Everyone on this panel and Muhannad, who's now gone, have paid the price for what we believe in, myself included. And because of the unbelievable, uncalculable devastation in Palestine right now, we are willing to pay the price for the things that we believe in if it means that we can continue to express love, continue to express solidarity, and to continue to demand, as Nala said, an end to this genocide. So with that, I want to say thank you to incredible panelists, Mohamed Ayash, Nala Abdo, Sunera Tobani, Mamadou Tal, and Sarah Rossick for being with us and sharing everything that you have shared today. I want to thank everybody who's on the live stream watching. Remember, we've got Elle Jones coming up just now. If you just refresh in a moment on YouTube, we're going to be back with Elle Jones on the same link. But before I leave, I must thank everybody who's been part of Scholars Strike and allowing what you've just heard and witnessed over the last couple of days to be possible. And oh, of course, my notes would disappear the moment that I wanted to come and do this. Here we go. I've got it. Professional live broadcasting, everyone. So I want to say thank you to everyone involved in supporting and organizing Scholars Strike, students, academics, all the volunteers. Thank you to those who helped in organizing, faculty and students from the University of Windsor, McGill, University of Concordia, University of Toronto, York University, Toronto Metropolitan University, Ontario College of Art and Design. Thank you to CUPE 3902 and CUPE 3903. Thank you for the endorsement and financial support from CUPE Ontario and COUT. Thank you to all the scholars and students who've contributed to the teach-ins and organized teach-ins. Thank you to all the moderators. Thank you to our poets, Sarah Malik and Elle Jones coming up shortly. Thank you to Erica Violet Lee for your amazing poetry. Thank you very, very much to Alessandra and Jen for technical and website skills. Without you, this would not have been possible. Thank you to everybody who watched for the last couple of days, and please feel free to continue to share these teach-ins. They're going to stay online. These are resources for you in your academic pursuits in the future. And I am going to say a special thank you, as we always have to Beverly Bain for making what we have just experienced over the last 2 days possible. It always starts with an idea. What if we did this? How could we bring together these folks? And Bev makes everything a reality from ideas and from grit and from hard work, so much hard work. And Bev, we salute and appreciate you for continuing to make Scholars Strike a reality in so-called Canada. As I said, stay tuned on the live stream. Wait 30 seconds or so, do a little refresh. We're going to be back with Elle Jones to close this thing out properly with some poetry. Thank you, everyone. My name is Desmond Cole, and it's been a pleasure.
All right, I ended the live stream. Thank you so much, everybody.
Woo!
That was an
Thank you.
incredible panel.